Sometimes the snow comes down in June. Sometimes the sun goes round the moon. I see the passion.
For our Perichoresis monthly meeting here. And first of all, we're going to talk to David Kowalick about his ministry. He's a pastor here at the Fishgate Church and also an active member in Perichoresis, but he's venturing out on a new ministry venture, so we're just going to talk about what he's going to be doing and what he has done already.
Well, the plan is just simply to preach, really, but not just to people that have already heard the message, but people who haven't heard the message. People particularly in Asia, places like that, or anywhere in the world really. I'm not particular about it. In fact, I don't even care about countries much. I think there's only people, that's all there is. And I'm sure that God doesn't recognise the borders on the ground and doesn't recognise the governments. They're not really that important so much as the human beings that live in the countries, wherever they might be. And whenever I've gone to places, particularly places like India or Pacific Islands or wherever, a lot of the ministers in churches there have absolutely no training theologically. They have some basic training about leadership and things that don't matter, but things that really do matter, as far as I'm concerned, anyway, things like theology and the gospel and things like that don't get taught to them. And so they're really struggling to really find things to even speak about. And when they hear the gospel the way we understand it, they immediately click onto it and they get it. And recently I went to India. Some of you will be aware I've had a long-standing relationship with Martin Phillip there. And he's been preaching the gospel now for around about 7 years. He's received a lot of persecution from his own denomination, his own church. But along the way, some people have taken notice of what he's saying, and eventually there's been a transformation to the point where this last conference we had pastors from all over India, and these were the key leaders of this entire church of around 3,500 individual local churches, who came to simply argue about whether or not this is true. And so we had an argument, and it was a good one. And Martin was actually set it up so that it would be a discussion and it would be an argument. And if you know anything about India, they like a good argument. It's not like some parts of the world where it's all polite. They're not interested in that. They want to know the truth, so they argue. And we had some passionate discussions. And in the end, the testimony of most of the people there was that they really had been affected by what they heard, and they were going to go back to the drawing board and look at the gospel again. And so the leader of the entire movement actually stood up and gave her blessing to the whole thing and said that we really do have to look at the gospel again and go right back to the beginning and review everything we believe about what is true about the gospel. So that's a pretty significant thing. And that's not the first time that's happened, but this is the first time some of the key leaders in the whole movement were together in one place. And that's just an example of the sort of thing that happens, and I've seen the same thing happening in New Guinea and Fiji and other places. And I think it could even happen here in Australia, who knows? But one thing that we do have here, we have access to the gospel through the internet, through books. We do have a lot of resources. But a lot of people in the world who desperately need to hear the gospel, who don't have access simply because of their poverty to either the internet or to books or anything. And I'll tell you what, when people like that hear the gospel and they really get a hold of it, because the gospel is true for everyone, and that's the other thing about the gospel, it's universally true across every culture. It doesn't make any difference who you're talking to. If it's true, and it's true everywhere. And if it's not true everywhere, it's not true anywhere. But the universality of the gospel and the way it affects every person, doesn't matter whether they're rich or poor, male or female, or whether they're what nation they're from, makes absolutely no difference. The truth is the truth. And so it's been an exciting thing to do. Anyway, so what I'm proposing to do is to cut back to half time at the church and to spend half of my time travelling to places where people don't have any money. And to do that, I'm going to need some money, but along the way. But I'm expecting that if there is money in it to do it, then that's what God wants me to do. And if there's not, then He doesn't. But at the moment I just feel like I'm being called to venture out at least to give it a whirl, and we'll see what happens. And so I'm basically willing to go anywhere. I've slept in some pretty crummy beds over the years, and I'm willing to sleep in some more. As long as I can actually sleep, that's all that really counts in the end, because the payoff is just so worth it. And anyone who would like to come and come on one of these trips with me, more than welcome to do so, as long as you're willing to sleep in fairly ordinary circumstances, that's all. But other than that, it's all gold. It really is. It's an amazing thing to watch the transformation that takes place over a period of a few days, when people come in antagonistic, anti everything you're saying, and by the end they're actually defending what you're saying, and that's quite exciting. That doesn't always happen, I've got to admit, but for the most part it does. So, well, you'll remember how the gospel affected you, and I remember when I first began to look at the gospel in the way that we now understand it, and I fought every inch of the way. But I find that the people who fight the hardest are the ones who come through the most in the end, because they're the ones who are thinking about it, really addressing the questions. So the questions are good, and it's worth doing. I think that's pretty much all I can say about it for now.
Yeah, I suppose if you look at the book of Acts, when Paul went around speaking, he had many arguments with the Jews and Gentiles, the Greek philosophers, and healthy arguments. And arguments could be good. Have you got any trips planned for this rest of this year, 2013, lined up yet?
I've got a lot of invitations. Most of them are going to have to be later on this year, but I've got an invitation that just came out of the blue to the east coast of India. A guy who's just been listening to the messages on the net, and he's dead keen. So, and I'm not interested in just going anywhere just for the heck of it. I'm only interested in going to places where people are already on the ground and already are trying to put forward the gospel in the way that we understand it already. And amazingly, well, I shouldn't be that amazed, I guess. It's happening everywhere. Talking to Mohan, because I stopped in at Mohan's place on the way back, spent 24 hours there, and he has contacts in Bhutan and Nepal and Sri Lanka and Pakistan and Burma, where people are already beginning to preach a Trinitarian gospel. He has been involved in helping them to do that, but there's just so much more work to be done, particularly among the pastors who've got no training. And think of this, these pastors have got no theological training, and then the only theological training they end up getting is a Trinitarian Christ-centered gospel. What could be wrong with that? that could work. We had nothing else we could preach, that's all we knew. Well, that's all you need to know, surely.
Truth is good.
And of course, then once they get rolling, then they will begin to discover things for themselves. And I'm hopeful I can put myself out of a job. That's what I'm hopeful of doing. No, I think there's a few people, so we may not run out of opportunities. But the opportunities are endless. It's just a matter of getting there and just one by one just doing it.
So do you have any plans to put out a newsletter or information about what you're
doing? Yeah, the plans are eventually, if I eventually get around to it, to put out a newsletter once a month, put out do a website and a Facebook page, all that sort of thing. Just keep people informed.
Right. So how could people get in contact with you if they wanted to support you, or email you, find out what you're doing and that sort of thing? You've got an email address or something you could tell us?
You can email me on my Gmail account, which gets me anywhere in the world, and that is kowalick.david@gmail.com. That'll do for now. But I will set up a proper website and do all that other stuff.
How do you spell Kowalick, David?
Kowalick.
I'll put it at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, .david at Gmail. And then I covered your prayer, and I covered your involvement as well. And in all seriousness, anyone who does want to come on a trip, I'd be happy for people to come on a trip. I don't want to take big teams, but 2 or 3 people at a time can be absolutely eye-opening, and you get some great opportunities just to talk with people. On the last trip I met, there was an Australian couple were actually from Adelaide, who happened to be in Goa at the time, and they understood the gospel the same way. And they were just talking with people at the end of each meeting, and it was incredible how much help they provided. And they just sat down and talked people through, and because there's too many people for one or two people to handle, and it was just endless opportunities for long conversations that went well into the night with pastors of churches all over India. And so that's the sort of thing that you can be part of. So you could go on a trip to Paris, I suppose, for a holiday, but you could also do something that really changes lives as well. You could combine the two. Who knows? Whatever. But it is a great opportunity, and so I do invite people to be involved in that way as well.
So I understand you won't be sort of working as a lone ranger. You'll be working with other people in relationship and have advisors here.
Yeah, I'll be setting up a board. So that's I'll be looking for people to volunteer to be on the board, who will help to set up the itineraries and manage finances and manage the emotional basket case, which is me. But yeah, it is. You have to manage yourself, and physically as well as spiritually, emotionally as well. So you normally come back completely wrecked after.
So you're okay with the food and water?
Food was great. I put on 2 kilos last time I was in India, which was just a few weeks ago, and I'm still trying to get that off. So they feed you well.
Very good. All right. Thanks, David.
Sometimes the snow comes down in June. Sometimes the